Let me start then. So in the last decade of Yugoslavia's existence, when all that remained with us was pretense of believing in socialist system, the collective Neue Slowenische Kunst, I will be using NSK or NSK in the following, engaged in reckoning not only with the extant government, but also with the gradual disappearance of a firm symbolic order. This was not simply a problem with the state of Yugoslavia, but a universal subjective disorientation of the contemporary world. The NSK collective was founded by three groups sharing similar retro-avant-garde concepts: Laibach, Irvin, and Scipio Nasice Sisters Theater, in Orwellian year of 1984, the moment of transition of a society of discipline to a society of control. Laibach statement, so what you can see here are 10 items of the covenant from 1982 that reflects not only the totalitarian impulses in Yugoslavia one-party system, but also the general colonization of subjectivity by the big brother that was the epistemological, monetary, religious, cultural, and media domination and the power of technological control exerted by the West. Here I quote one of the statements from the 10 items. So I quote from Laibach: "All art is subject to political manipulation, except for that which speaks the language of this same manipulation." About a decade later, Slavoj Žižek characterized this type of approach as over-identification. I quote Žižek: "The strategy of Laibach frustrates the system, the ruling ideology, precisely insofar as it is not its ironic imitation, but over-identification with it. By bringing to light the obscene superego underside of the system, over-identification suspends its efficiency." End of quote. There is no need to underline how irony and criticism best serve the system itself, especially today the capitalist system. In his writings from the late 80s and early 90s, Žižek emphasized that the uneasiness triggered by NSK, even in some left-wing critics of the system, of Yugoslavian system, stemmed from the fact that the collective had never assumed a clear and ambiguous critical distance from the government, and from the assumption that ironic distance is automatically subversive. One of the highest provocation, which was among the main tools of NSK in 1980s, was reached in 1987 with the poster for the Day of Youth, of holiday, celebrating Tito's birthday. So here I have the New Collectivism, the design group within NSK, took part in the national competition for the best Day of Youth poster. They based their entry on 1936 Third Reich propaganda painting by Richard Klein and won. Here you can see Klein's original from the 30s on your right side. Part of the reason may be that the poster reminded many of socialist realist art, the memory of which was already being eroded in Yugoslavia. The artist kept the athletic male figure from the original, but removed the Nazi symbols and replaced them with Yugoslavian ones. The Yugoslav tricolor of red, white, and blue, the five-pointed star, the six torches from the Yugoslav coat of arms representing the six republics of Yugoslavia, and white dove. These symbols replace the German eagle, the Nazi flag with swastika and so. This montage was only noticed by the government after the jury had already proclaimed the winner. What followed was a scandal beyond compare in the cultural history of post-war Yugoslavia. Zizek wrote about poster affair in a letter from afar in 1987. In that essay, he emphasized that NSK draws attention to fundamental phantasms, the phantasmatic myths and constructs on which our national identification is based. But it does this in such a way through a whole range of alienation processes that we are able to achieve distance from these phantasms. So these alienation processes are, of course, the montage of heterogeneous images, incompatible constructs, the reiteration of phantasmatics, and so on. It was Leibach that first started moving science from one context to another, beginning with the group's very foundation in 1918, when it chose to call itself after the German name for Ljubljana. Numerous public reactions, as well as the official prohibition of the name in the 80s, show how jarring this choice was given the still enduring memory of occupation of Ljubljana during the Second World War, when the German name for the city was last in use. One of the fundamental constructs of post-war Yugoslavia, the basis for the national consciousness in Slovenia and elsewhere in Yugoslavia, was the partisan resistance to the occupier. All that the post-war mythologization of the national liberation struggle served for was obviously empty state rituals. In addition to name Leibach's key symbol is the cross. So, the Leibach cross does not refer only to Kazimir Maljevich's suprematist motive, but also to the black cross that marked German military vehicles and aircraft during the World War II. The black, so you can see here a few, so this was the poster in the year when Leibach name was forbidden, and they announced their concert only with that cross, and a lot of people came, of course. So the black Leibach cross on posters, on fanzines, on paintings, on the sleeves of the members' uniforms, as you can see, for example, here. And it's, so on different paintings, posters, and so on, does not serve any social identification purpose and is simply a sign of social fascinations. Zizek wrote on various occasions that NSK's metaphors brought their opponents face to face with their own nightmare, which does not tolerate reflection with the unbearable core of the pleasure made possible by the limits set to us by the big other. On the one hand, NSK performs the roles of totalitarian types in Nazi or socialist regimes. On the other hand, and at the same time, it speaks about repressive power of the media and about the totalitarian impulses in Western pop culture, where the boundaries laid down by the master have been unrecognizable. From the very beginning, Leibach has been uncovering through its performances and music the obscene aspects of both Eastern European and Western societies, including by citing Western hits at various points in its discography. One such an example is Laibach's song Geburt einer Nation, the birth of one nation, from their album Opus Dei in 1987, copied after Queen's 1985 song One Vision. Expect that it is in German. One Vision was inspired, One Vision of Queen, of course, was inspired by concerts where the audience in their thousands automatically repeated the band members' gestures. Global popular culture and global technological control have remained the center of Laibach's interest until the present day. For instance, in their song, the whistleblowers, they sing, for example, from north and south we come, from east and west, breathing as one, living in flame or dying in flame. So this is from the video spot, which I really recommend you to see and to listen to this song. Here, Laibach draws attention to heroes like Edward Snowden and Julian Assange, who resist contemporary totalitarianism. While Laibach today over-identifies with pop cultural image, in the 1980s it was much more explicitly totalitarian and bureaucratic. The entire NSK, so also the Irving and the theater group, at that time worked on deconstructing the state, its ideology, and artistic system, including through hierarchical organizational schemes, manifestos, programmatic text, declarations, interview with pre-written programmatic statements. All these texts and schemes, for example, the scheme of the whole NSK, all these texts and schemes speaks about the subject of subjection of individual to the collective, or in other words, about the ideology replacing an authentic form of social consciousness. It could be said that through its manifestos, NSK wanted to take the place of the big brother. So something like that, for example, happened in the avant-gardes of early 20th century, or recently also in the philosophy, for example, in the manifests of Alain Badiou and so on. So it's something that says, that calls for more active role of art and philosophy as well. Ever since their founding, the central theme of all the NSK groups has been the state. Both the specific state, whose national myths appear in their work, and the state as an abstract organism, the law on which all concrete ideological constructions are based. Thus, NSK did not only deal with the dissolution of Yugoslavia, but with the dissolution of the symbolic order in general. This is why NSK never was a typical Eastern European dissident art project, since the collective was more interested in finding out to what extent the big other was still operant than in providing clear, ambiguous criticism of the extant regime. In NSK's work, the concrete state of Yugoslavia was only a singular manifestation of abstract organism of the state, but also paradoxically a foreshadowing of another concrete state, that of independent Slovenia formed in 1991. Based on this, it could be concluded that with the founding of Slovenia, what NSK predicted came true, and that in this sense, NSK's might even be the nation-building art. It may have been in order to avert just such a fatal misunderstanding that in 1992, NSK founded the NSK state in time, fundamentally distancing itself from the nation state as well as from the national culture. It is true that this distance has been maintained by the NSK since the very beginning. To start with, the naming of the collective itself was a performative gesture. The act of its naming appeared to be a call for a new national art, but at the same time, the NSK distanced itself from such art by using the German language. The hegemonic language, as you probably know, Slovenia was part of Austro-Hungarian Imperium, and even before, through its whole history, somehow related to the German language. As stated above, the whole of NSK's work reflects the problem of non-functioning of the state, a particularly tragic real-life manifestation of which was the war in Bosnia and Herzegovina. With regard to this, Žižek says that the war in Bosnia and Herzegovina may have been a consequence of an absence of a unified state authority about ethnic divisions. He speaks of the NSK state as a contemporary utopia of a new state, a state without territory, an artificial structure of principles and authority. The NSK state in time, which may now be the largest artistic state in the world, counting 14,000 members, has become independent of NSK itself and is governed by its members. Today, this artistic state draws attention to the importance of idealist vision for the survival of the state in the sense of shared principles and laws without which no human society can function. When artists take the law in their own hands, they must certainly do become political subjects. Okay, so I stop here. Thank you.